Over the course of less than a decade, BAFTA Award winner Cory Barlog rose from the artist to the writer and game director of one of Sony Entertainment's biggest franchises. Selling over 51 million copies, Barlog steered the God of War series firmly into the territory of a system seller. Games, however, were not the creative outlet he originally pursued. This is the story of Cory Barlog, God of More. Born in 1975 in Sacramento, California, Barlog dreamt of working in the film industry. A small role in Joe Dante's 1993 film Matinee and an appearance in the Untouchables television series in 1994 were to be the start of that dream. That year he began a Bachelor of Art in Animation and Film at Columbia College. Although currently ranked among the top American film schools, at the time it wasn't for him. In 1997, rather than finish his degree, he decided to look for work. Winning a bet between friends that he couldn't get a job within 6 months, he was hired by DreamQuest Images, a visual effects company owned by Disney.
It was $50. I had to do it.
After working as a character animator on the films Flubber, Mighty Joe Young, and Inspector Gadget, he left the industry a year later. Cyclone Studios was founded in 1993 as an independent studio after securing a contract with the 3DO company to produce their first game. They moved to offices in Redwood City, California, the home of 3DO. Joining in 1998, Barlog was unsure if he would remain in the games industry.
I was disillusioned from my experiences in film, and honestly did not even think I would even stay in games beyond this one job.
The 3D studio was the brainchild of Trip Hawkins, founder of Electronic Arts. As their flagship console, the 3DO Interactive Multiplayer, was floundering, 3DO began to pivot towards becoming a third-party developer. It was that link to 3DO that was a bone of contention for Barlog.
When I went to Cyclone, one of the first things I said was, I am only interested in coming here if you guys are not fully owned by 3DO, because I don't want to go over and work for 3DO. I'm not interested in that. And they were like, no, we're all independent, right?
With that assurance, Barlog began working as an artist on the PC title Requiem, Avenging Angel. Barlog said the situation changed at Cyclone with the release of the Half-Life demo in November 1998 and the paradigm shift it brought to the industry. The 2 games that had been in development at Cyclone were cancelled, and after Requiem Avenging Angel shipped in March 1999, the Cyclone name was no more. Following through with his promise of not wanting to be part of 3DO, Barlog joined Paradox Development in mid-1999. Founded 5 years earlier, Paradox specialized in fighting games, holding a number of licenses including X-Men. Hired as an animator on Rock'em Sock'em Robot Arena, Barlog would go on to lead the animation team on X-Men Next Dimension and Backyard Wrestling Don't Try This at Home. It was perhaps this succession of projects with little to no narrative and subpar gameplay that Barlog's desire to tell stories began to simmer, and his mind was once again turning to film. He would leave Paradox in mid-2003. This departure would be the start of the indelible mark he made on a studio and the games industry as a whole. But once again, this was not the mark he intended to make. Established in the offices next door to developer Naughty Dog, Santa Monica Studios wanted to develop games for the upcoming PlayStation 2 console. Developing an engine for the hardware, they produced Kinetica, a futuristic racing game that was well received and would later be available on the PlayStation 4. Demonstrating to Sony that they could ship on time and on budget, they began work on God of War, using their proprietary engine. In late 2003, game director David Jaffe offered Barlog the role of lead animator. In hiring him, Jaffe wanted someone who could take over the struggling animation department, bring it into shape, and who he would not have to worry about. Barlog accepted, but with very different ideas. His intention had been to cruise along to the end of development, take the money, and make a film.
Day one I was thinking, whatever, I'm on vacation. But then I stayed all night and animated, and on day two I became this huge proponent of the game.
Throwing himself into every aspect of the game's development, he had regular conversations with Jaffe, connecting particularly on philosophy. Little did he know that this bond would lead to the biggest opportunity of his career. 3 months prior to its release, plans for the God of War sequel were underway. David Jaffe's desire to step away left producer Shannon Studstill with a director-size hole to fill. Approaching Barlog in early December, Studstill told him of Jaffe's decision to move on to other projects, and that his name had kept coming up as a potential replacement. Pressed after a week of indecision, he accepted, and a week and a half after wrapping on God of War, he began God of War 2 as creative director. Surrounding himself with people he had worked with at other studios, particularly Paradox Development, he created what he described as a super team.
You know what? Is that everybody working on this game pretty much all worked on games that weren't that successful. Prior to God of War, we'd all been making fairly subpar games. We just all clicked and came together.
At the 4th British Academy Game Awards, God of War 2 would take home the BAFTA for Best Story and Character, giving the writing team of Cory Barlog, David Jaffe, and Marianne Krozik their first major award.
The only other thing higher than this for me is to go direct some movies. I'd go do that, but beyond that, I'd stay in this job. It's brilliant.
Even so, the workload was staggering, bigger than he ever imagined, and when the third installment began a week after God of War 2 was finished, the cracks were beginning to show.
Cory Barlog, who's our creative director, has given us 2 week notice.
8 months into the development of God of War 3, he departs Santa Monica Studio.
Nothing you can say is going to come across as anything but, you're an asshole.
Cory Barlog left Santa Monica Studio to be like Cain from Kung Fu and wander the earth. He wanted a better portfolio and to creatively be able to work on multiple projects.
I just decided I needed to move on. I had some opportunities with people and was like, I want to learn from them.
Barlog started operating as a game consultant under the name Lone Gunman Incorporated.
I found myself working on a game concept on the deck of a yacht in Monte Carlo with a crazy German music producer. He carries around a furball dog everywhere he goes, and the heir to some British toilet paper fortune.
In March 2008, Barlog reacquainted himself with Australian filmmaker George Miller to discuss a number of projects.
It was a masterclass in storytelling.
A game based on George Miller's Mad Max movies was to be their first project together. But much like the early days of Mad Max Fury Road, it languished in development hell. Avalanche Studios would later release a Mad Max game, and although Barlog worked with them on it for nearly a year, ultimately it would become a different game altogether.
It's just unfortunate the way that sometimes games go that they ended up going in a different direction, and George and I ended up not working on that one with them.
In 2009, Barlog moved to San Francisco, signing on as full-time creative director at LucasArts. Attending a story conference with George Lucas at Skywalker Ranch, he read the scripts for the cancelled Star Wars series Underworld.
It was the most mind-blowing thing I'd ever experienced. I cared about the Emperor. They made the Emperor a sympathetic figure who was wronged by this fucking heartless woman. She's this hardcore gangster, and she just totally destroyed him as a person. I almost cried while reading this.
These stories would give him inspiration for the new direction he would later take with Kratos. Unable to let go of the past, he joins Ready at Dawn, developers of the God of War titles, on Sony's PSP. But after serving as writer for God of War Ghosts of Sparta, he once again moves on. In mid-2010, as creative director, he helps establish KMM Interactive Entertainment, a Sydney-based game developer. This venture would be to help George Miller's production house, Kennedy Miller Mitchell, break into the video game industry. Their first project would be a tie-in for his upcoming movie Happy Feet 2, for which Barlog would serve as creative director. But once again, the wanderlust took hold, and he returned to home soil and back to a AAA game.
So much has happened.
Joining Crystal Dynamics in 2012, Barlog was hired to direct the sequel to the reboot of Tomb Raider, which was still in development. After locking him down, he was brought in early to help direct their current cinematics, which were proving troublesome. After watching their approach to rebooting the beloved franchise, though successful, he saw many ways that he would have done things differently.
That was really good for me because it gave me a good understanding of, when they were rebooting, what was their process. I ended up using that.
He left the role of directing Tomb Raider 2, seeing no way that he could do it without changing everything they had just established. But an idea was forming, and it was time to go back to the well. When Barlog returns to Santa Monica in mid-2013, the studio is hard at work on a new IP.
It was an interesting time to come back to. I had been in discussions with Shannon for a while about having another God of War story in me. I wasn't sure what exactly it would be, but I knew that I wanted to try something new.
But within a year, the game would be cancelled, staff would be laid off, and the studio would relocate. Barlog would later say he felt a tremendous amount of responsibility, since he had been part of the studio since the early days, and it was part of his own creative legacy. Reimagining God of War was to be a deeply personal time for Barlog, a culmination of the experiences he had gone in search of, and a constant struggle with self-doubt. The direction he was taking Kratos, a reflection on becoming a father himself, was a significant departure for a franchise the fans were losing interest in.
But I think it was a necessity.
And the BAFTA for Best Game is awarded to God of War.
You know, look, creating things is really hard, as we all know. It is daily failure, constant doubt, this feeling that what you're doing is really not that great, not that good. And every once in a while, there's a shining moment of, aha, I got it, which is followed by sobbing. So you guys are amazing, and we would not be here without all of you. Thank you, everybody.
Cory Barlog has a storied career that goes so much further than just God of War, Santa Monica Studio, and Sony. Had Simon and I not had him as a research topic, we would have more than likely just known him as that guy from Sony who did God of War. Over time, as we collected information, our question became more specific. Rather than simply asking, "Who is Cory Barlog?" we asked less high-level questions like, "Why did he leave the film industry?" and "What did he do between leaving and returning to Santa Monica Studio?" The answers to these questions were often surprising, at the very least, intriguing. The times we found Barlog at his most interesting were easily the periods in which it was the hardest to pin his location down. Many of these projects, places and timeframes presented us with not a whole lot to go on. In many cases, any information we did find was vague at best and hazy at worst. These gaps in information are most likely due to the general hush-hush nature of the work, NDAs, and the deeply personal reasoning behind his desire to wander and learn from as many experiences as he could. To the extent of our knowledge, however, we managed to limit these gaps to months and even weeks in some cases. Cory Barlog. Actor, artist, animator, writer, director, award winner, God of More.